Remember when woke was like a good thing? Now it's practically a weapon, and cancel culture is like the internet's boogeyman.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Those words, they've become so loaded, almost like these grenades you throw into conversations.
Exactly. And that's kind of why we're doing this whole deep dive today on Dansplain. I'm Edward.
I'm Lily.
We're going to be your guides through this whole messy world of woke and cancel culture. We've got a whole bunch of articles, some research, even some notes from you guys. And we're going to try to pull out, the most interesting stuff, the most helpful stuff. So think of it as like a shortcut to understanding this whole thing.
Exactly. We want to cut through all the noise and help you really get what these ideas are all about and why they matter so much.
Okay, so first we got to go back in time, right? The origins of woke are actually pretty surprising. We're talking early 20th century, like deep roots in African-American vernacular English.
Right. It was about awareness, being alert to social injustices, especially when it came to race. It was like a warning system.
Like, hey, wake up. This is happening.
Exactly. And there are some really early examples of this, like Lead Belly's protest song, Scottsboro Boys, from 1938. It was a direct plea to Black Americans to stay woke to the very real threat of racial violence.
So it's not just like some new slang that popped up on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's got this like deep history connected to social activism.
Absolutely. And then, fast forward to 2014 and the Black Lives Matter movement picks up the term. But now it's got a slightly broader meaning. It's not just about race anymore. It's about awareness of all kinds of social injustices, including gender and sexuality.
Right. Okay. But here's where things get interesting and maybe a little controversial. Woke starts getting used by everyone, like the media, companies, and it starts to feel diluted or even a bit performative.
Yeah, and that's where the backlash comes in. People like Elon Musk are calling it a mind virus, saying it's stifling free speech, critical thinking, all of that.
It's almost like woke became this trendy label, and people started using it without really understanding or engaging with the deeper issues behind it.
Right, and there's also this question of whether capitalism kind of co-opted it, turning woke into a marketing strategy instead of a real commitment to change.
So it's like this complicated evolution.
Yeah.
Started as a powerful call to action, then got kind of co-opted and watered down, and now it's facing a ton of criticism. But that doesn't mean the issues it was addressing have disappeared.
Not at all. Woke culture, especially in its more authentic forms, is still a major force in progressive circles globally. There's a continued push for equity and inclusion, for awareness of systemic issues, especially in areas like climate justice and LGBTQ plus rights.
Okay, so that's woke.
Yeah.
Let's talk about cancel culture. This one feels even more, charged, right?
Definitely. And just like woke, it's got roots in those online social justice movements. Think #MeToo, #BlackLivesMatter. These movements really put the idea of holding people accountable for their actions front and center.
It was all about public pressure, right?
Yeah.
Like if you did something wrong, you could face boycotts, public shaming, lose your platform, your job, even your reputation.
Exactly. And we saw it happen with some really high profile figures like Bill Cosby, for instance. He faced a huge backlash, boycotts, everything after the accusations of sexual assault came out.
It was like this new form of social justice, but it also raised a lot of concerns, especially around, due process and whether it was just a mob mentality taking over.
Right. And there's actually research suggesting that both woke and cancel culture might be on the decline. We're seeing some signs of a backlash, some fatigue setting in. There are articles talking about a shift away from woke opinions and practices, particularly in America.
And there's even this feeling that Gen Z, who are like the pioneers of a lot of these online movements, are starting to distance themselves from woke, seeing it as like cringy or performative.
That's right. But it's important to remember that this decline it's complex. It's hotly debated. Some people see it as a natural correction. Others see it as this deliberate attempt to silence progressive voices, particularly from those on the right.
So it's not just fading away. These ideas are still very much in the mix, but the way they're being seen, the way they're being used, it's shifting. Okay, let's get into some of the criticisms, shall we? What are some of the main negative impacts people have raised about woke and cancel culture?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is that it's chilling free speech. People are afraid to speak their minds, to say anything that might be deemed unwoke because they're afraid of being, labeled, shamed, or even canceled.
Yeah, like everyone's walking on eggshells, constantly worried about saying the wrong thing.
Exactly. And this fear, it's not unfounded. We've seen people lose jobs, lose opportunities because of things they've said online, even if it was taken out of context, even if it didn't really reflect their actual beliefs.
It's almost like there's this unspoken list of rules, and if you break them, even a little, you can face some pretty serious consequences.
Right. And this fear can lead to self-censorship, which ultimately stifles, open dialogue and critical thinking.
Okay, so that's free speech. What about the impact on actual activism and social change?
Well, there's a lot of criticism about what I call performative activism. It's this idea that people are more focused on looking woke on social media than on actually doing the work to make real change.
Like virtue signaling gone wrong. Like
Uh,
posting a black square on Instagram instead of, I don't know, donating to a racial justice organization or
Yeah.
volunteering your time.
Exactly. And this focus on appearances, it can actually be harmful to real progress. It creates this illusion of change without actually addressing the underlying systemic issues.
Yeah, and there have been some real-world consequences, right? Like that women's shelter in Vancouver that lost funding for not following certain trans-inclusive policies.
Yes, that case really highlighted how these ideological battles can have unintended consequences and even harmful ones, especially for communities that are already vulnerable.
So it's not just about online debates and hashtags. These movements can have very real impacts on people's lives.
Absolutely. And another major criticism is that both woke and cancel culture, they contribute to societal division and polarization. They create this us versus them mentality, and that can lead to more hostility. And it makes it harder to have productive conversations about these really complex issues.
It's like everyone's dug into their trenches and there's no room for nuance or understanding.
Exactly. And you see this polarization everywhere in political debates, online, even in personal relationships. It's making it harder to find common ground, to work together to solve problems.
Okay, so we've talked about free speech, performative activism, societal division. What about the specific harms of cancel culture?
Well, one big concern is that there's often a lack of due process. People are often canceled based on accusations or allegations without a fair hearing, without a chance to defend themselves.
So it's like being judged by a social media mob without any chance to tell your side of the story.
Right. And the punishments, they can be really harsh, often way out of proportion to what the person is accused of doing. We've seen people lose their jobs, their reputations, their entire livelihoods over a single tweet, a single social media post.
And it's not just celebrities or public figures who are vulnerable. Even regular people can find themselves targeted by these online mobs, facing constant harassment, bullying, you name it.
And we can't forget about the impact on mental health. The shame, the humiliation, the isolation, it can be really damaging to people's well-being.
We're talking job loss, depression, even suicides in some cases. It's a serious issue.
It is. And even if someone doesn't experience those extreme consequences, the fear of being canceled can create a constant feeling of anxiety and self-doubt.
Like living under a microscope, constantly worried about being judged and scrutinized.
Exactly. And that kind of fear, it can really stifle creativity, innovation, even just the willingness to be yourself. People become afraid to take risks, to express unpopular opinions, or just to be authentic because they're afraid of the backlash.
So we've covered a lot here. The origins, the rise, and the potential decline of these movements. And we've looked at some of the biggest criticisms and concerns. But before we wrap up part one, let's try to connect this back to you, the listener. How do you see these concepts playing out in your own life?
Think about your social circles, your workplace, your online interactions. Are you seeing examples of woke culture or cancel culture there?
And more importantly, how do you deal with these complex and often conflicting ideas? It's a lot to think about, and we want to hear your thoughts. We'll be diving deeper into the arguments for these movements, and we'll explore some of their potential benefits in part two. But for now, take some time to reflect on what we've talked about and think about how it connects to your own experiences. All right, so in part one, we really got into like the dark side of woke and cancel culture, all the criticism, the potential harms. It can feel kind of heavy, you know?
Yeah, for sure. These topics, they definitely tend to bring up like strong reactions, and the critiques are definitely worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
But like most things, there's got to be another side to this, right? It can't all be doom and gloom. These movements, they didn't just come out of nowhere. They wouldn't have gotten so big so fast if there wasn't something driving them, you know? Something people felt was really important, really necessary.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in the negative, but we got to remember that these movements, they came from a real desire for social justice, a real desire for a more, equitable and inclusive world.
Right. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's explore the potential benefits,
Yeah.
the positive impacts of these movements. Because to be fair, there are some.
Definitely. And one of the most significant impacts of woke culture, especially in its early days, was that it shined a light on issues that were totally ignored or dismissed before.
Yeah, like think about systemic racism, right? People kind of whispered about it, but it wasn't really part of the mainstream conversation.
Exactly. But with woke culture and movements like Black Lives Matter, it became impossible to ignore. Suddenly everyone was talking about it. And not just, quietly. It forced society to confront these uncomfortable truths, to acknowledge that things needed to change.
And it wasn't just race, right? Woke culture helped bring other issues to the forefront too. Things like gender inequality, LGBTQ plus rights, climate justice.
Absolutely. These were issues that had been, bubbling under the surface for years, for decades. But woke culture gave them a platform, a voice, and a sense of urgency.
Okay, so awareness is one thing, but did it actually lead to any real tangible changes?
Well, one of the most visible changes has been in representation and inclusivity. We're seeing more diverse voices in media, in politics, in business. It's not perfect, not by any means, but there's definitely been a shift.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Even just watching movies and TV shows, there are more characters from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations. It's not just the same old anymore.
Exactly. And this increased representation, it matters. It helps to normalize diversity, it challenges stereotypes, and it creates a more inclusive, more welcoming society for everyone.
And it's not just about being seen, right? It's also about giving people from marginalized communities a seat at the table, a chance to share their perspectives, to influence how decisions are made.
Absolutely. And this shift in power dynamics, that's another big impact of woke culture. It's challenged those traditional hierarchies and forced people in power to be more accountable.
Okay, so we've got increased awareness, more representation, a shift in power dynamics. What about cancel culture? Are there any arguments in favor of that?
Well, it's definitely the more controversial side of things, but some people argue that it can be an effective tool for, holding people accountable, especially when they do or say harmful things.
Right, especially in cases where, the traditional justice system, it hasn't worked or it's not accessible. Think about the #MeToo movement, right?
Huh.
It gave survivors of sexual assault and harassment a way to speak out, to demand justice, even when the legal system had failed them before.
Exactly. And in some cases, cancel culture has actually led to real consequences for powerful people who had always managed to, avoid being held accountable before.
Of course, it's important to be careful to avoid that whole mob mentality thing to make sure that punishments are fair. But some people argue that just the fear of being canceled, that can act as a deterrent. It can make people think twice before, engaging in harmful behavior.
It's like this unspoken social contract, If you break the rules, if you cross the line, you risk facing the consequences.
Right. It's about setting boundaries, establishing accountability. But the question is, does it actually lead to positive change? Or does it just create more division and resentment?
That's the big question, isn't it? And honestly, there are no easy answers. I think the key is to approach these conversations with nuance, to recognize that there are valid arguments on both sides, and to try to find solutions that promote both justice and understanding.
Okay, so we've looked at both the positive and the negative aspects of woke and cancel culture. And it's complicated, right? There's no easy good or bad, just a lot of gray area and difficult conversations to be had.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to acknowledge that these movements, they're still evolving. They're constantly being shaped and reshaped by social and political forces. And, our understanding of them is probably going to keep changing too.
There's this interesting idea I've heard. It's this saying, easy times create weak people, and hard times create strong people. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting one. It definitely ties into this whole debate. Some people argue that these movements, especially woke culture, they're a sign of a society that's become too soft, too sensitive, too shielded from, adversity.
Like we can't handle dissenting opinions or even just like the slightest offense.
Right. And they see that as a problem, a weakness that needs to be addressed.
But, isn't there another way to look at it? Maybe this increased sensitivity, maybe it's actually a sign of progress, a reflection of a society that's becoming more empathetic, more compassionate.
Yeah, absolutely. It all comes down to perspective, right? What one person sees as a weakness, another might see as a strength.
Right. And maybe the key isn't to go back to some like idealized version of toughness, but to find a balance,
Yeah.
to hold on to our resilience, but also, cultivate compassion and understanding.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that these conversations are complicated, they're nuanced, and there are valid points to be made on all sides.
So where do we go from here? How do we navigate this complex landscape and actually have these difficult conversations in a way that's productive, in a way that's respectful?
Well, I think the first step is to be willing to listen, to really listen and try to understand different perspectives, even if we don't agree with them.
And to be willing to challenge our own assumptions,
Right.
to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Absolutely. And to remember that these aren't just abstract debates. These movements have a real impact on people's lives, both positive and negative. So it's important to, approach these conversations with empathy, with a real desire to find solutions that work for everyone.
So to sum up, woke and cancel culture, they're multifaceted. There
Yeah.
are no easy answers. They sparked some really important conversations about social justice, about power dynamics, about the role of online platforms in shaping how we talk about these things.
And those conversations are probably going to continue. They're going to keep evolving, keep adapting as societies grapple with these really complex issues.
So stay tuned for part 3, where we'll take a closer look at how these movements are playing out in different parts of the world and what the future might hold. All right, so welcome back to Dansplain for the final part of our deep dive into woke and cancel culture. So far, we've been looking at, the origins, the possible good stuff, and the criticisms, mostly in the U.S., right?
Right, yeah. I mean, those terms, they definitely started in the U.S., but these conversations, they've gone global. And it's kind of interesting how it's playing out in different places, sometimes unexpected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out a little bit. Let's see how these ideas are, being used, being challenged, maybe even being redefined in different parts of the world.
Okay, so starting with woke culture. It's definitely gained a lot of traction in progressive circles around the world, especially in countries with, strong social justice movements. For instance, in a lot of European countries, there's a big focus on racial equality, LGBTQ plus rights, climate justice, things like that.
And are they using the term woke in these conversations? Or is it more about the ideas behind it, do you think?
It's kind of both, actually. You'll hear woke being used, especially with younger people and online, but it often gets mixed with local terms and ideas.
Yeah.
So it's not just a direct copy from the US. It's being adapted to different cultures.
That makes sense, like a global conversation, but with different accents, right? But I'm guessing it's not all smooth sailing, is it? Are there places where woke culture is facing some pushback?
Oh, definitely. In some countries, it's seen as a Western thing that clashes with, traditional values, or even a threat to their national identity.
Right, so it's not universally loved, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you have any, specific examples?
Sure. Well, in India, there's been some resistance to what some people see as, imposing Western ideas about gender and sexuality. There's this feeling that woke culture, the way it's often presented in the U.S., it doesn't really take into account the complexities of Indian society and culture.
Okay, so they feel like it needs to be, localized, right?
Yes.
Adapted to their specific context.
Right.
What about other parts of the world?
Well, another example is Hungary. The government there has been very opposed to what they call woke ideology. They see it as a threat to traditional family values and national sovereignty.
So it's become a political battleground in some places. They're using woke as a weapon to push their own agendas.
Exactly. And it shows just how important it is to really understand the nuances of these conversations in different cultural and political contexts. What might seem like a straightforward social justice issue in one country could be tied up with a whole bunch of other factors in another.
Okay, so that's woke culture. What about cancel culture? Are we seeing similar global trends there too?
Oh, absolutely. With social media connecting everyone, cancel culture has become a global thing. We're seeing people and even brands being canceled for stuff that's seen as offensive no matter where they are.
Yeah, like that whole thing with that comedian in the UK. I think he made some jokes about, was it royalty? I can't remember exactly, but it was all over the internet.
Exactly. And those situations bring up a lot of questions about cultural differences and context. What might be offensive in one culture might be totally fine in another.
Yeah, trying to figure that out online can be tough, especially when things go viral so fast.
Yeah. It can. And the reactions to cancel culture itself are all over the place. In some countries, they see it as a good thing, a way to hold people accountable, for social justice. But in others, there's a lot of skepticism, even fear. They see it as like online mob justice without fairness or due process.
It's almost like it's showing us the values and anxieties of different societies, right?
Exactly. And the legal side of cancel culture, that's being debated all over the world, too. Some countries are thinking about making laws to protect people from online harassment and defamation. But there's this worry that those laws could be used to shut down free speech and people who disagree with the government. It's a complicated legal situation that's still changing.
So where do we go from here? What's next for woke and cancel culture? It feels like we're in this weird spot where these terms are like everywhere, but they're also kind of losing their meaning.
Yeah, it's true. There's definitely a sense of like woke fatigue. It feels like they're overused and even used as, weapons sometimes.
But the issues underneath it all, the worries about social justice, inequality, accountability, that stuff's not going away.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Do we need new words, new ways of doing things?
I think it's less about new words and more about having conversations that are, more nuanced, more informed. We got to move past the extremes, the black and white thinking, and really try to understand the complexity of these issues.
I like that, embracing complexity. So instead of just throwing around labels like woke and canceled, we need to actually, talk about the real issues, listen to different points of view, and be open to changing our minds.
Exactly. And I think we're starting to see that shift happen. People are realizing that these terms have limits, and there's this desire for more constructive conversations.
So maybe the future isn't about woke or cancel culture as we know them now, right? Maybe it's about finding new ways to talk about these things, building bridges instead of walls, and working together to, create a more just world for everyone.
That's a really good way to put it. It's about progress, not perfection. It's about realizing we're all on this journey together and learning, growing, understanding. Those are things that never stop.
Yeah, well said. So I think the big takeaway from this deep dive is that woke and cancel culture, they're more than just trendy words. They represent this whole complex, changing set of ideas and conversations about social justice, power, and being accountable for our actions.
And even if those specific words fade away or change, the issues they've brought up, those are going to keep shaping the world for a long time to come.
So, like always, we encourage you to keep learning about these topics, have thoughtful conversations, and be open to learning and growing. And if you're looking for more deep dives, articles, and other resources on these and other cool subjects, make sure to visit our website, www.dansplain.xyz. We've got a bunch of great content there to help you stay informed.
Thanks for joining us.
And keep on dansplaining.